We're live, people. We're live. My name is Alam. Welcome to another In Motion football stream. Today, we'll be looking at the AFC North and previewing them as a division for this upcoming season. As always, it's something that I talk a lot about, something that I'm always going to be annoying about, whether you're watching this live or on replay. Make sure you get engaged with the the content. Make sure you're liking the videos, subscribing to the channel, leaving comments if you're watching on replay, and getting active in the chat if you're watching live. All these forms of engagement are things that YouTube's algorithm looks for to figure out which content to push to the wider YouTube audience. So all your engagement helps, and if you enjoy what you're watching, make sure you stay plugged in. So with that said, we'll just get right into the proceedings this evening. I'll share my screen here and pull up the first team's depth chart that we'll be getting into, which is the Cincinnati Bengals. So Cincinnati, now that I have it nice and zoomed in for us, Cincinnati is an offense that, um, if you watched the last video previewing the AFC East, they've bought in on continuity quite a bit. This is essentially the same offense last year. The main difference is being the tight end. Um, actually forget his name. Hayden Hurst went to Carolina. Irv Smith has taken his spot. Orlando Brown has been added to play left tackle. Mind you, that's supposed to be the position he's not as good at compared to his best position, right tackle. Samaje Perine is gone, and Chase Brown takes his spot. So a team that is more or less the same of what we've seen from last year. And honestly, the year before. The year before, they made more changes. They brought in offensive linemen. I think that's when they got Ted Karras and Alex Kappa. But you know what to expect from this Bengals offense. They're very good. They perform at a high level. They haven't really been considered the weak point for the team at all in the last little while. But my thing about consistency in the NFL is that I think that it's important for a team to have consistent pillars. I don't know if showing up with almost entirely the exact same unit is the best thing in the world, because if you want to assess the pros and cons of consistency, right? The pros are like familiarity amongst the guys and people understanding each other, and there just being a high level of cohesion between the players on the team. And that's awesome. That's great. That is always a good thing, undoubtedly. But the cons of consistency, I believe, in the NFL are that people figure stuff out. People get lots and lots and lots of tape on different players, and eventually they find a way to figure offenses out. Um, Not that I suggest that the Bengals offense will be figured out. It's just with the amount of consistency that they've had over the last few years, if I were to have a concern, it would just be that you've you have as is a lot of tape on what you guys do, given the fact that the coach has been consistent, the main pillars on the offense has been consistent, and a lot of the supplementary pieces for the offense has been consistent too. So much of the same is going on. There's um so many opportunities for people to troubleshoot kind of their own tactics against or like their own theories about how to stop you. So with that being said, if I look at the Bengals, as much as I like their offense, as much as I like what's going on, I do suspect that there is a chance that tactically things could get figured out. And my thing about the Bengals is that while their offense has been really good, when they've been eliminated from the last two seasons, what has their offensive return been? Um, I'll pull it up just to be precise. Uh, the Bengals Rams Super Bowl, they had 20 points, and then Bengals Chiefs AFC Championship game. This is the game. Oh, they lost by, I think, the exact same score. So this is the thing. In the last two games that this team got bounced out of the playoffs, or I mean, lost the Super Bowl. So the last two times their season ended, they scored 20 points in each game, which is against good defenses. Like, don't get me wrong, Rams defense, very good defense. Chiefs defense, good defense. But those aren't team defenses that I think should be able to keep this offense to 20, but it happened twice. And this is football, people. One loss and you're out. So I look at this Bengals offense and look at the track record of having very high highs, but when it comes down to it, when it's time to win football games at the end of the season, I've also seen this offense not really function to its highest level. So being that that's the case, I don't look at the consistency and the fact that that they're essentially the same team as a strongly positive thing. I think it's okay. Like I'm not going to sit here and complain about the fact that they're a very similar offense to last year, but I'm just going to be hesitantly um feeling positive about what they got going on because that's just where I'm at. I don't think that a 20 offense that scored 20 points in the last two times their season has ended is an offense that should um just sit back and like be okay with the status quo. When your status quo is generally as good as theirs is, like I have to reiterate this, like yes, they're a good offense, but I feel like you should be trying to put your foot on the gas and try to be as good as possible. They are Cincinnati. This isn't the biggest, like, most ambitious organization in the world, but they have a good thing going on. And if I was them, I'd be putting my foot on the gas. I would want to take this unit to the highest level I possibly could. And I don't think that they've done that as an organization offensively. I think there's a lot of buying into the status quo and I don't particularly love it. So, as much as we got to credit them for being good, we also have to be concerned by the fact that their season will probably end in a game where the offense scores 20 and people won't talk about it. So, that's just my thing on the offense. Like, I could sit here and talk about all the different things they do to cause other teams headaches, but we already know this stuff because we've watched this exact same unit play a lot of football together. We know the threat that Jamar Chase and T. Higgins pose to secondaries. We know the threat that Joe Mixon poses to front sevens, and we know what Joe Burrow can do, healthy or not healthy. So that's not really something I'm going to sit here and talk you guys through too tough. I just want to make it clear that, like, as positive as there is to feel about those things, why not do your best to try to switch things up and try to stay ahead of what defenses will be trying to figure out to stop you? Like, why not keep your foot on the gas? You have an opportunity that's once in a lifetime. I've never seen this organization have such a good product on the field offensively. But why sit back and be so conservative year after year after year? And like conservative is maybe the wrong word, but just like complacent. That's the better word. Why be complacent with what you have when you've been bounced out of the playoffs or you've had your season end on 20-point offensive performances? Just my thoughts on the offense, people. That's ultimately the reason why I won't pick them to win a Super Bowl because I've just seen it happen twice now that just pretty good defenses have been able to corral with their offense when it comes down to big moments at the end of the season. So while the offense is rather stable, the defense, I believe, does have quite a bit of changes. So it's mainly the safety room. If you look at it, they're turning to Nick Scott, a free agent from the Rams last year, and a rookie first round pick from 2021, Dax Hill, as their starting safeties. I believe they lost one of their corners or not. I think Cam Taylor Britt may have played last year, but the safety position is where a lot they've experienced quite a bit of change. They didn't pay Jesse Bates, they didn't pay Von Bell. They had the opportunity to groom Dax Hill last year, who they obviously would feel good about if they're relying on him. And they paid Nick Scott, who didn't cost much. For what we know about the Bengals defense, they're gonna play well. I mean, as I showed you guys the scores of the last two times their season ended, they gave up 23 points to a Rams offense that I thought was very, very good at the time, and the Chiefs offense, which is the Chiefs offense, it's phenomenal. Sandy Reed and Pat Mahomes. So this is a defensive unit you can always trust. The defensive coordinator, Lou Anarumo, very veteran player, very established defensive coordinator and defensive play caller, somebody who I think on this side of the ball commands the respect of the unit. A lot of key players returning. I think the addition of Miles Murphy is solid because he can sit there and play as much as he can um, like as much as he is able to contribute, that'll help them. If he's just producing in short spells to complement Sam Hubbard, that's great. If he's good enough to overtake Sam Hubbard, that's great. Regardless, pass rushing depth is always a positive thing. So to get that is great. You still have DJ Reader, who is a very, very underspoken about player. That's a player that is going to command double teams. That is a guy that's going to hold down the middle of your defensive line. Very slept on player, somebody that's not mentioned a lot. But this is the thing with the Bengals. While obviously the offense is more consistent, the defense has the safety room that's changed up quite a bit, but generally Cincinnati's done a good job of holding on to what they have. They've had a pretty consistent team. Obviously, you look at their linebackers, both third round picks in 2019 and 2020. So two players that have been in the system for a while under Lou Anarumo. Trey Hendrickson's been there for a minute now. DJ Reader's been there for a minute. Sam Hubbard, you can see, third round pick from 2018. Chidobe Awuzie has been playing big minutes for them for a while. Mike Hilton has been there for a couple years now. Honestly, the main three, I guess, players that are relatively new in the grand scheme of things are the top two picks from last year, Dax Hill and Cam Taylor-Britt, and then the free agent Nick Scott. So, there's some change in the secondary, but for the most part, this is a pretty similar unit. And this is the overarching theme about the Bengals that has to be spoken about, is that, like the Bills, this is a team that's buying in on consistency and buying in on what they've had for the last couple years. But that thing that they've had at the last couple years is ultimately a team that hasn't been able to get the job done. The difference between the Bengals and the Bills is that the Bengals have beat the Chiefs, and they've shown that they can do it. They can go toe to toe with the Chiefs consistently. But ultimately, it's not just about the Chiefs. You do have to go beat a very good team in the NFC. And I think whether they run into the Eagles or the Niners in a hypothetical Super Bowl, they're going up against another very good team. In something I'm going to talk about when I talk about the Ravens, and I'll kind of save it from the Bengals standpoint for now, is that in the AFC, you're going to play a lot of great teams in the playoffs, but also over the course of the season and the playoffs, the interdivisional matchups in this division are very good. So this is just the thing, the Bengals are going to play a lot of big football games, and they're going to play a lot of these big football games against great teams who have seen a lot of these players in these schemes. I just don't love the decision to just stay with what you got from the Bengals and the Bills. You got to take risks. That's just what I believe. When you have an opportunity that you're not used to as an organization or a franchise, I think you're supposed to take risks. And I don't think the Bengals and the Bills have taken risks to get better. I think they've more so safeguarded against getting worse by sticking to what they have. And I'm not a particularly big fan of it. So if you noticed, I had the Bills third in their division, which some would say is harsh, but ultimately I think the two teams ahead of them are much better. And spoiler for the end of the stream is that I won't have the Bengals at the top of the division. So that's just my thing, people. I think, football is a very tactical, strategic game, and the coaches at the highest level take this stuff very, very seriously. So you give coaches 2 years of relevant tape, and that's the important thing, is that the Bengals tape from the last 2 years is very relevant because there are a lot of the same faces. And then you give them 17 plus more games of tape, and then you let those coaches analyze all the different things people would have thrown at them. At some point, it's going to be hard to present other teams with something new and something that's fresh, that hasn't been seen before, that's effective. So that's my thing with these teams. My main criticism is that buying in on consistency, I don't think is the best idea. But that's where I'm at with the Bengals. I will pivot now to the other team in Ohio, conveniently right below this team on the Our Lads depth chart website. We're going to move on to the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns, who my take on them is that they have a very good, I think on paper, they're not that far off from a lot of very good teams. I don't think the talent gap between Cleveland and some of the best teams in football is huge. But that being said, I just don't know if Cleveland has the recipe for success, because ultimately football is very much not about what's on paper. So I'll kind of get into it as I talk about the Browns, but we'll start with the offense. I'll zoom in a little bit so you guys can get a better look at the players. Well, we have a receiver room that I think last year had two good players in Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones, but now they're a team that's added two, I think, very good weapons. They've added Cedric Tillman and Elijah Moore. Now Cedric Tillman, I don't know how much he'll produce in his rookie year. And just generally, I don't know how high ceiling of a player he is, but I think he's a pretty high floor player. Like, I think what he gives you, you can rely on being a big bodied player, being a player that can use his size to make catches, to shield off defenders, and to get opportunities to catch the ball. I think that's a player that he's gonna provide a role. Ultimately, if Elijah Moore plays very well, he might not see so much of the field, but he provides a very distinct thing, and he's not going to be relied on to be, I think, the number one or number two receiver. So that's a good asset to have. Elijah Moore is a player I think a lot of people think is probably better than what his Jets tenure would show. And I think he has every opportunity to show just how good he is in Cleveland. He will not be getting the attention of a number one receiver. He, in theory, should have a competent quarterback. Um, and yeah, he's ultimately a part of a team that has a very good running game that is going to draw the attention of defenses first and foremost at the line of scrimmage to stop Nick Chubb. He should get a lot of one-on-one. Whatever Elijah Moore's best case scenario is, we should be able to see it in Cleveland. And to be honest, from based on what I've seen from him prior to the NFL at Ole Miss, I believe that's where he's playing in college. I think he should be good. So you know what you're going to get from Amari Cooper. Obviously, he's had injury issues in his career. If he stays healthy, you look at what he gives you. You look at what DPJ gives you. You look at what Elijah Moore should give you, and you look at what Cedric Tillman I think is established at in terms of his skill set. And you have a functional receiving core. Now, is this the best receiving core in the league? No, you have receiving cores like the Dolphins, Bengals, and Eagles, but this is a functional receiving core where nothing's missing except maybe like a burner, maybe like a true deep threat. And I don't know what I don't know what exactly they see in Marquise Goodwin in terms of, like, I don't know if they look at him at that as that, and he hasn't quite functioned as that in the NFL. But that's just the only thing that this receiving core is missing. They have, through the different options here, they have a little bit of everything. So yeah, I don't think that this receiving core is gonna hold the team back in any way, shape, or form. So that's why ultimately I like what they have there. Like, again, like, to reiterate, not the best receiving core in football, but not a receiving core with really many deficiencies. So let's take that about the receiving core, put it to the side. They have an offensive line that is bringing back established players that have done pretty well in the NFL for the most part. Obviously, we know Batonio's history. Jedrick Wills is very good. Jack Conklin's really solid. They got some guys up front. Obviously, a part of what they do really well is opening up opportunities for Nick Chubb. I don't think they have like the greatest options behind Nick Chubb if he gets hurt. I think that would really mess up their season if anything happened to Nick Chubb. But you know what you got in Nick Chubb, right? Um, if the running game does what it's supposed to, and I think the passing game, the receiving core, as we've already illustrated, should have a lot of opportunities to go well. That whole thing feeds into each other, the running game and the passing, the receiving core. So now everything falls to the quarterback position and Deshaun Watson, and we're all gonna now pose the question: is, are we gonna get Deshaun Watson of, those last, maybe that second last season in Houston, the year that the Texans beat the Bills in overtime in the playoffs? Can we get that version of Deshaun Watson? Because if so, Cleveland has put enough around him for this offense to be very good. Because if an MVP caliber quarterback is placed in an offense where Nick Chubb is in the backfield doing the damage that Nick Chubb does, and he is then opening up opportunities for a receiving core that has four guys that should provide a bunch of different things to that in as a collective should give a quarterback a lot of different, options and possibilities. This offense should be very good, especially considering that it's not like the offensive line should be getting beat up. But the question is just, what are we going to get from that quarterback? It's as simple as that. There's a developing kind of there's a developing history of players that miss a year not ever really looking the same. Deshaun Watson obviously did not look the same last year. Now, the people who have a positive slant will say, hey, he knocked the rust off because he missed a year. People with the negative slant will say, um, he doesn't have like the people with the negative slant will say he took a year off, not took a year off, he had to take a year off, and he's not the same player anymore. But that is the big question for the Browns offense that will ultimately determine how good their offense is. Like I said, my the premise of what I started this with is that I don't think Cleveland is that far off some of the better teams in the NFL from a talent standpoint, but they may not get it done because of some of the dynamics on their team, and this is one of them. One of the dynamics is how good is the quarterback that you made the highest paid quarterback in terms of guaranteed money. You paid that player that much money to play at an MVP level. You built a team around him that should allow him to play at an MVP level. So now it's time, right? This is now what they've built up towards. This is, and to credit their general manager, I think he's built the stuff around that quarterback to, in order to have a certain level of expectation and have it be justified. Now we got to see it. So that's how I look at their offense. Um, Again, the two things that I'm looking at is how healthy is Nick Chubb and how good is number 4. So with that being said, we'll turn to their defense. Their defense is this year being coached by Jim Schwartz, a defensive coordinator I'm familiar with because he coached the Super Bowl winning defense of my Philadelphia Eagles. So I know what to expect with Jim Schwartz. I think handing him Myles Garrett is amazing for him. I think having pass rushers that can get to the quarterback as 4 men or as 4 pass rushers is really what he looks for. Obviously, you have Zadarius Smith on the other end. You have Dalvin Tomlinson in the middle. You have Shelby Harris, who's a standard, solid role player on that defensive line, is my way of putting it. But yeah, Dalvin is going to clog up the middle. Shelby Harris is going to do his job. This defense, I think, will go as far as Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith take them. Zadarius Smith, obviously, is a player that I think is a couple years into his 30s. Never mind. 92 born. So he is turning 31 this year or is already 31. But nonetheless, obviously he's a player that you're wary of potentially falling off because that's what happens to NFL players in their 30s. So one day they just wake up and they don't have it anymore. So if that's the case with Zadarius Smith, obviously you look at the defense differently. But if he can show up like the player that we've seen at times in Minnesota, and if Myles Garrett can show up as one of the best players in the NFL because he is one of the best players in the NFL, I think they have enough here to feel pretty good about their team. So if we look at other parts of their defense, I think Anthony Walker is a serviceable linebacker. I think Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is a player with upside. So he's a player that's, always a candidate in the early parts of his career to potentially pop out of nowhere and become a really good player. You got players in the secondary like Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, Juan Thornhill. Obviously, Grant Delpit hasn't quite lived up to the hype, but another good piece there. I think if I look at the personnel that the Eagles defense had when they were under Jim Schwartz, now, were they an elite defense in the way of just like they were infallible? No, but they were a very good defense in the sense that they did their job to complement a good offense, which again, like I said, is what Cleveland has done enough to have on paper. But if they're the good offense that I think they could be, this defense has enough to complement that kind of offense. And what I mean by that is that Eagles defense was a defense that generated enough pressure on the quarterback and enough mistakes due to that pressure to even out some of the deficiencies they had in like their ability to cover receivers, right? Because we had guys like I forget one of the cornerbacks' names. Oh yeah, Darby, Patrick Robinson, and Jalen Mills, right? I don't think anybody there is considered anything close to elite. Had Malcolm Jenkins and Rodney McLeod as their safeties, who were very good players, I think. But like we didn't have that corners like that. But we defended in numbers more often, and we had a defensive line go get it, right? We had 2 waves of defensive lines that were really good That's ultimately something I don't think Cleveland has, but Myles Garrett is a monster. Myles Garrett is far better than any edge rusher we had, right? So if he's able to hold that defensive line down and do things that, maybe not everybody else could do, and really provide the impact of multiple players, which again is possible, this defense could function at a good enough level to where an elite offense should be able to carry the Browns to a very good record, right? So, like I said, you look at the names on paper here. This is not a defense that's that far off of some of the better defenses in football, right? Juan Thornhill is very good. Denzel Ward is very good. Greg Newsome is good. Delpit's solid. Martin Emerson, I'll be real, I'm not overly familiar with. Third round pick from last year. I don't quite know much about him. But Taki's been there for a good minute since 2019. Anthony Walker's steady. Jock, like I said, breakout candidate. Myles Garrett's elite. Shelby Harris is solid. Dalvin Tomlinson's pretty good. Zadarius Smith, again, has had some very good moments. He's 31, so we'll see what he has left. But yeah, there's enough here to where if everything breaks right, this team could be very good. But the problem is that there's a lot here that also, if it doesn't break right, they'll probably be average. I think there's too high of a floor because of the talent with this team, but I think there is a pretty big gap between their floor and their ceiling. And honestly, like there's three big pillars on their team that you're going to look at and say their ability to be very good relies on these three players. So with the offense I mentioned, it was Deshaun Watson in terms of playing at the elite level that he's paid to play at, Nick Chubb in the way of staying healthy. And on the defense, it's Myles Garrett because he has to produce at a very high level to kind of offset the fact that the Browns don't have the players up front that some of the old Jim Schwartz teams had, right? Because he had Ndamukong Suh in Detroit. He had obviously Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham and just waves of players in Philly. I don't think that the Browns have like superstars like that, but they have good players, and it's all Myles Garrett, the best, I think, defensive lineman he's ever coached to really play at that type of 99 Madden rating kind of a level. So that's what it is with Cleveland. All eyes on their superstars, all eyes on their best players. If they do what they're supposed to do, which somehow in Cleveland just finds a way to not happen, this team should be a pretty good team. So that's what we have in Cleveland. We're going to make our way to Baltimore, the third team in this preview here, a team that I think is a Super Bowl contender. I think Baltimore is really, really good, and we'll get into why that is. But the first place you have to start with their offense for me is definitely the offensive coordinator. I'll be real. On the top of my head right now, I totally forgot the offensive coordinator's name, so I'm just going to pull it up real quick to avoid having to say offensive coordinator over and over again. Todd Monken, right. Okay, so Todd Monken. So here's my thing, right? I don't think Greg Roman is the best coordinator. I think he's a functional coordinator. I think as a coordinator, what Greg Roman is good at is getting the best running game out of a running quarterback. So you look at his time with Colin Kaepernick, his time with Tyrod Taylor, and his time with Lamar Jackson. I thought he got phenomenal running games out of great running quarterbacks, but I don't think he was ever able to get the best vertical passing game out of those quarterbacks, and subsequently I think that hurt the offenses. So my thing with Greg Roman is that you can maybe look at Kaepernick and Tyrod and speak to limitations as a thrower, but I don't think you can do the same with Lamar. So when I saw Lamar kind of functioning similarly to those other quarterbacks at times in the offense, I said, look, Greg Roman is holding him back. That's my personal opinion. So now you look at a offensive coordinator like Todd Monken. He likes throwing the shit out of the ball. That's what Todd Monken does. And then you look at the offensive output he's been able to have. I've watched this guy have functional passing games with Ryan Fitzpatrick and Baker Mayfield. So you give Lamar Jackson, and then the inverse, you give Lamar Jackson a guy like him, and I think the pieces are in place for this offense to be very good. And I think the first place you look when you look at the personnel is the receiving core. Why? Because this is the best receiving core Lamar has ever had by far. It's not Chris Moores and Willie Sneeds and Nelson. No, they do have Nelson Aguilar. That's not now, but like some of these names that we've seen the Ravens put out at wide receiver. This is not that, people. They got OBJ and Zay Flowers, right? Obviously, with both names, some people are going to identify concerns with Flowers. The concern would be how young he is. He's a rookie, and obviously, you don't always want to rely on rookies to be amazing. And then the concerns with OBJ are his injury related, but you look at the upside with both those players, it is like high. And then you kind of further add the context of the fact that the Ravens haven't really put a lot of upside pieces around Lamar at the receiving position. If even one of them pops off, that's still a great situation for Lamar. And if both of them pop off, my goodness, we could see some special things going on in Baltimore offensively. So you start with the receiving core because that's the newest part and the newest wrinkle to what Baltimore will do offensively. But the rest of the offense, people, this is stuff that we're familiar with. This is stuff we understand already. We know what Baltimore is going to do with their offensive line, their backfield, and their quarterback. They're going to have a very effective running game, regardless of who the running back is. We've seen them have solid running games with J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, Justice Hill, and others. All right, and the core of that is Lamar Jackson. Right, when your quarterback is that big of a threat with the ball in his hands, the whole defensive box isn't always looking at the running back. The running back is almost the second, if not almost, he is the second most important threat for at least one person in the box, right? So this running back's always going to be running at a slightly lighter box than he would in other circumstances. That being the case, the Ravens also tend to put pretty good offensive lines out, regardless of who's playing, right? Because guys come and go with this offensive line, but they tend to do really good things regardless. Obviously, I think it's anchored by Ronnie Stanley and Tyler Lindenbaum. I think those are their standout players. Zeitler and Morgan Moses are in the 30s, right? They could fall off. But even still, like if you look at their backups, right? Third round pick from 2021, fourth round pick from 2022. At guard, they got a sixth round pick from last year. I trust the Ravens drafting and scouting enough for one of those three players to be solid in the event that they have to play, probably two. With that being the case, we know what Mark Andrews is going to do. I like Isaiah Likely. I think he's a solid option as a guy to play small minutes. And if he has to play 2-3 games because Mark Andrews is hurt, I'm cool with that as well. But yeah, Baltimore, you got a running game that should be good. You got a vertical passing game that should be good. You got a quarterback that can make it all work together. You got a quarterback that I think has carried some offenses that weren't necessarily built for him, or not for him, but not in his best interest. Yeah, this could be an MVP season for Lamar. Everything's in play for him to contend for MVP and for the Ravens to contend in the Super Bowl. Obviously, I'm just talking about the offensive side of things right now, so we can put teams things to the side. But there's no reason Baltimore shouldn't be really good aside from like injury. If they don't look like a very good offense, something big went wrong. Like somebody basically is a fraud, because if everybody lives up to who we know them to be, this team should be very good offensively. So, J.K. Dobbins, we don't know what's going on with his health and whatnot, but like even if J.K. Dobbins doesn't play, if Gus Edwards has to play or if Justice Hill has to play, I think they'll be fine. Like that maybe it won't be a running back that scares you, because I think J.K. Dobbins could scare you, but they don't have to scare you because Lamar will, right? And Patrick Rickard will get his few touches every now and then too. But yeah, no, man. I love this offense so much. I think Lamar, sneaky MVP candidate, which he shouldn't be. There should be nothing sneaky about it, but I think he is. Yeah, I would go as far to say like this is one of the better receiving cores that a running quarterback, so to speak, has had. You compare this to any of Lamar's receiving cores, any of Cam Newton's receiving cores, Colin Kaepernick's receiving cores, Mike Vick's receiving cores prior to Philly. This is a great receiving core, right? We saw what putting a great receiving core did for Jalen Hurts, guys. If the two receivers, like I said, Zay Flowers and OBJ, if they play to the high level that in theory they could, man, we're gonna see some special things from Lamar, and that's just where I'm at with them. I think they'll be really good. That's the offensive side of the ball. We'll get to the defensive side of the ball. Now, for the defense, I think it's like the tale of two seasons for them. There's like the pre Roquan Smith defense last year, and then the post Roquan Smith defense. Another thing to keep in mind is that their defensive coordinator was hired from Michigan after Wink Martindale left for the Giants. So, Harbaugh brother A hired a coach from Harbaugh brother B's staff in Michigan, nothing to see here, people. But yeah, obviously that's a huge step. It's a huge step for a guy with no NFL experience to be coaching at Michigan and then get the job with the Ravens. And understandably, honestly, I think he had some, growing to do to get accustomed to his new position and his new situation. But as the ship kind of steadied in that regard and they got Roquan Smith, I think the defense was really good at the end of last year. We saw what they did to the Bengals in the playoffs. They had the Bengals offense looking ordinary. They almost won a game with Huntley. You could argue if Huntley doesn't fumble that football, they basically do win that game. So and that would be on the back of this defense. So you look at what they've added. They have Jadeveon Clowney. I think there was a signing in the secondary. I think Rocky Sin is new. But yeah, Jadeveon Clowney is only going to help. Veteran presence, run stopping extraordinaire. But yeah, people, this defense is very good on paper. There's a lot of continuity from last year, a season where they began to figure it out towards the end. Not the craziest thing to assume that they should keep up where they left off. I know as of right now, I believe they have a lot of injuries in the secondary going into the season, so maybe they'll start slow again. But I think this defense should figure it out. And again, if you look at, you have to look at the defense and the offense together, right? What their offense should be doing, it's not even like the Ravens have to sit here and hold people to 15 points or under. If this defense holds teams to 20 points and under every week, that should result in a lot of wins because this offense is capable of doing a lot more than that in terms of scoring more than 20 points. So, yeah, that should be what happens. That, they should be holding teams to under 20 points, a lot of them at least, because there's enough here. Roquan, obviously, first off season with the team. They have young draft picks, or they have draft picks that should be getting better. So you look at the 4th round pick from Alabama. I believe he was at Alabama, Jalen Armour Davis. You look at a Kyle Hamilton. You look at Odafe Owe. You look at a David Ajabo. Who else is there? There's somebody else. Oh yeah, Travis Jones. But yeah, you look at these guys. You should expect them to get better. The Ravens, they always find a way to add talent to their team. Trenton Simpson could take Patrick Queen's job and he could serve as an upgrade. So, this is what it is, people. The Ravens are very, very good. Again, if they're not a Super Bowl contender, somebody's a fraud. So that's where I'm at with this team. I think on paper they're very good. I think there's more than enough reasons to believe that what they are on paper should show on the football field at some point. And I would be very excited if I was a Ravens fan. And that brings me to the last team in this division that we're going to be talking about. We're going to close the stream out with the Steelers. I thought that they'd be closer in terms of scrolling, so I scrolled through every team. I could have just Command F the Steelers and saved everybody the time. But here we are, people. We got the Pittsburgh Steelers up here. I think they're a fascinating team. I think they have the potential to be one of those fraudulent elite teams. And when I say potential, I mean that's probably their ceiling. But what I mean by that is that, how like it'll happen sometimes where a team wins like 12 games and it's like, oh my God, is this team actually very good? But like in reality, they're just good. Take the Vikings from last year, take, the Giants to a lesser extent, a team that's their record is a little bit flattering. They're not as good as what, maybe it looks like on paper or like in the standings. But the reason I say that is that I actually think this team is built to overachieve. I think that there's a lot to like in this receiving core. I really like Deontay Johnson. I really like George Pickens. I think already that's enough. If some other things are good on the team, which I think are in this case, uh, to be a receiving core that helps you win a lot of football games. I think they've invested a lot in their offensive line. Obviously, they have Broderick Jones coming in. I think if he doesn't start immediately, he'll start at some point in the middle of the season. And it'll probably serve as an upgrade to what they had last year. Isaac Seumalo, somebody I'm very familiar with as an Eagles fan, he's going to show up and just like do a very good job. Is he going to be elite? No, but he'll be very good. Mason Cole, I'm not too familiar with. James Daniels, I pretty sure was a scrub at some point in his career in Chicago. But you have Nate Herbig, who I think is a very good run blocker. I don't know what the plan is for him. I know they paid him in free agency a little bit, but yeah, the offensive line should be okay. Like it shouldn't be bad by any means. I think they've done enough upgrades for it to be functional. Like that's what I mean when I say okay. I mean functional. Obviously, they have two tight ends. They have Pat Fryermouth. I really like Darnell Washington. He only fell because of medical issues, but he's such a good tight end. And if that's your two tight end set, that's a pretty great two tight end set to have because you have Darnell Washington's blocking ability in the running game, and then also like they're both respectable threats as passing targets as well. So when I look at this offense, right, I think about what's your formula for winning football, right? The formula is the running backs, right? Najee and Jalen Warren. By the way, I think Jalen Warren's kind of slept on. I actually think he's decent from the bits that I've seen of him from last year and like the preseason this year. I think he's a solid player. So you look at what they could be as an offensive line in terms of functionality, what that could mean for the running backs. And what I mean by that is, running backs do their job and they hold it down. Like good running, like not great or in the elite when it comes to the running game, but good running game, right? Kenny Pickett making plays with his feet and his arm. I wasn't overly optimistic on him as a prospect. I'm still not looking at it like, wow, this guy's great. But there's things I saw last year where I felt like, okay, I think he might be a gamer, and I think he might be like a scrappy quarterback that like punches above his weight. Um, Obviously, he's the guy who did the fake slide in college, so like he's a guy who has a lot of confidence. And sometimes in football, I feel like if you show up as a quarterback and you just say, you know what, screw it, I'm just going and like play almost with like an arrogance that's above your ability, it can work. Like that's what Eli Manning was for me. I think Eli Manning had a lot of suspect parts of his game, but he just went out there and said, screw it, I'm just going to throw this football. Like I think Kenny Pickett has that screw it, I'm just going to go make a play that allows him to punch above his weight a little bit. Like I said, I don't think he's that great of a quarterback, but I saw some moments where I'm like, he's a bit of a gamer. He's tough. Um, if he can get an offense that kind of like meets him halfway or even more, and he could get an offensive coordinator that knows what to do with him, he can win football games. So that's what I mean. Like the first thing I said about this team was like this team could win more games than they should. I think Kenny Pickett is a big part of that because I think he's that kind of a player. I think that if they become a team that understands how to use two tight end sets and they're out there with Fryermuth and Darnell Washington and they're running the ball well, and then off the back of running the ball well, they have Pickens and Deontay Johnson doing work down the field. I think Pickens is primed to have a really big breakout season at some point this year, right? This is a team that ultimately I think could win a lot of football games, right? I think Deontay and George Pickens, if you stack the box against an offense with them, they'll punish you. And, vice versa, if you then focus too much on them, two tight end set could really be effective in terms of running the ball with Najee, who I think is like high floor. I don't know how high his ceiling is as a player, but Jalen Warren's decent. I've seen him do some very physical running. So if the defense plays good football, if the offensive coordinator calls good plays and things break right for them, man, their offense could actually, I think, overperform what a lot of people see as their ceiling. So that's where I'm at with this offense. I think worst case scenario, maybe it's like average. But man, I like George Pickens a lot. I like Deontay Johnson a lot. I think Najee and Jalen Warren is functional. I think their tight ends are really solid. So there's enough here to where like I said, like I'm seeing a vision. I'm seeing if Pittsburgh's defense can do some Pittsburgh Steelers defense kind of things, there might be more wins here than this team, frankly, like actually deserves. So the second part of that hypothesis does involve the defense, who, very good edge rushers in TJ Watt and Highsmith. I think underwhelming linebackers, but linebacker, I think, is the position on the football field that you can get away with just having guys that do a role and do a role in a steady way. So that could be Cole Holcomb, because I've seen him have some decent moments in Washington. It could be a Landon Roberts, like the linebacking crew. I don't think will be a strength in this defense, but it probably should be functional. Obviously, they have Cam Hayward up on the defensive line. They got Ogunjobi, who's steady. And then Keanu Benton, a player who has a chance to be a difference maker. He's a player that, if things break right for him early in his career, is a player that probably helps them a lot up front. Obviously, in the secondary, I don't know how thrilled I am with the Patrick Peterson signing, again, because I know he played like generally solid in Minnesota, but with these players into their 30s in the NFL, putting as big of a bet as they are putting on him in terms of him being as of right now, look, Joey Porter isn't listed as a starter. I think he'll start at some point, but Patrick Peterson is the CB1. He's going up against the other team's best receiver constantly at this big age. So I don't love that part of the formula. I think Joey Porter Jr. could be pretty good as a rookie. I don't know what they're going to persist with, but I actually like Desmond King as a nickel corner. I think Chandon Sullivan will probably be okay if needed anyways. DeMonte KZ, he showed that he can play a role in Dallas. Minka, obviously, we know, is very, very good. But I think this defense will have to be carried by its pass rush. There's no there's no chance for this defense to be good, or like very good, without TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith playing amazing football. So they have to be healthy and they have to be amazing. If not, I think this defense will be average. But if so, they have a chance to be okay, right? But so this is my overarching like hypothesis about the Steelers, is that if the pass rush shows up and they play phenomenal, and everybody else, the Steelers have, aside from them, enough to where if everybody plays a role, the unit should be able to function. And then offensively, if they effectively run the ball and if Pickett does his gamer things, yeah, this team could be one of those teams that runs off a lot more wins than actually the talent dictates. So I think the potential for overachieving is there, but ultimately, because of their secondary situation and because of their linebacker situation and because of kind of how much Keanu Benton would mean to them up front, I'm not all that high on Pittsburgh, especially in respect to the competition, because you're going up against the Ravens and the Bengals. You're going up against very, very, very good football teams. So yeah, I think they're in a situation where if the division was weaker, maybe you could expect more. But I'm not going to do that given the competitors they have in the division. So with that being said on the Steelers, you then have to think about, how does this division shake out, right? And I guess I'll stop sharing the screen for this moment. But yeah, so when it comes to the division, right? My thing about the Ravens, the Bengals, I brought this up earlier in the stream. I think it sucks for them that they have to be competing in such a tough division, because that'll make it hard to get that number one seed. The number one seed in the playoffs is crucial. This is an opportunity to get a bye week, to get some rest. This is something that if you give to a Kansas City is detrimental. It's something if you give to a Jets or a Dolphins or a Bills team is detrimental. In a way, the fact that they almost don't have a chance of getting the bye week because of how tough the division is something that probably is gonna damper like my willingness to bet on them winning a Super Bowl, right? And it's not just the fact that you have the Ravens and the Bengals, because look, the AFC East is good too, but in my opinion, there's a team in the AFC East that is like very, very far away from the top of the division in a way that I don't think either of the teams are in the AFC North. I think the Browns and the Steelers, I've talked about their upside. I've like a lot. Where like I said, if things break right for both those teams, I think they could both be like easily playoff teams. But in the fact that just things don't break right for everybody, I would go ahead and if I had to bet, I would bet on it not breaking out. But like there are teams that are going to give the Bengals and Ravens headaches in those divisional matchups. Those teams in those divisions have 6 divisional matchups that are all tough. Personally, I think in the AFC East, when the best teams go up against the Patriots, that's a game that they'll be winning. Like we saw what the Bills did to the Patriots in that wild card game. That's possible to do to the Patriots, right? I can't sit here and act like it's a for sure thing that the Patriots are better than that team because they don't bring in great talent consistently anymore. So, with all that being said, yeah, I think the Browns and the Steelers are going to present a better threat to the best teams in that division than the Patriots do. So, Bengals and Ravens don't think have a chance of getting the 1 seed. The division, I think, generally will have upsets in the divisional games. I think they'll beat each other up. This is tough AFC North football. It's cold weather football. It's physical. It's violent. So when I go into ranking this division, obviously I'm putting Bengals and Ravens up top. So I'll put it in the chat right now. So I got 1 Ravens, 2 Steelers. Oh, whoa, said that by accident. Bengals. And then for 3 and 4, I have to figure out what I want to do. Come to think of it, I'll probably go. What do I think is more likely? I'll give it to the Browns. And then 4 obviously is the Steelers. So yeah, I'll put it up here so that it lives on in the stream. You got Ravens number 1, you got Bengals number 2, you got Browns number 3, you got Steelers number 4. Steelers being a competitive 4. Like I said, they have a chance to be good. Again, I spoke about their upside. I just don't think they will. But people, if they win a lot of football games, I told you here first how it would happen. But if I have to bet on good fortune for your upside, I will not be betting or picking that. But I do acknowledge that there's upside for the Steelers and the Browns. Yeah, like I said, I think this will be shown in how tight the competition is for the division down the stretch. You'll probably not see the Ravens or Bengals have, 15-2 or 14-3 kind of records because of the interdivisional games they have to play. And that'll hand the advantage to teams like the Chiefs and the AFC East competitors. But that's my preview for the AFC North, people. As I always say, I talk about it a lot. Whether you're watching this live, whether you're watching this on the replay, make sure you get engaged with the content because as a viewer of content on YouTube, the power is in your hands to help channels get bigger. So like I said, YouTube's algorithm looks for engagement to decipher which content should be pushed to the wider YouTube audience. And if you comment and like and subscribe and share and be active in the chat during streams, all these things, YouTube figures that the content should get pushed to other people. So if you enjoy what you're watching, you have the ability to make the channel bigger. And then I have the ability to give you guys more content. So if you enjoy what you're watching, make sure you stay supporting. Like I said, I'm going to try to knock out a divisional preview for every single division. So it's getting close. We're 1 week away from football. So I'll be probably doing a divisional preview every evening. So if this is something that you enjoy, tap in every evening, people. I will see you guys around. More content coming soon.